All right. Welcome today. I have Allie Ho with us today from Shoreside Therapies. And I just want to say thanks for coming in today.
Thank you for having me, Laurie. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So today, this is a topic that comes up very frequently for most people that I know, as well as our clients. It's about holiday stress and how to make it through the holidays with the least amount of stress as possible, right? Like, how do we get into the holiday season with feeling like our best self, reducing as much stress as we can?
Yeah, this is very timely, especially with Halloween just passing and the
Mhm.
weather changing. This weekend is daylight savings time. So that is why I wanted to chat about this because you're absolutely right. My friends and family are talking about it, and clients are like anticipating the next 2 months of activities.
Yeah. And this year in general felt like the fall season is really kind of short. So I think a lot of people in this last week or so have been really feeling like, oh my gosh, it's fall and Thanksgiving's around the corner. And then of course Christmas and all the other holidays that we have going on. Primarily it's going to be family related, right? Or friendship related, depending on your life, right? But what goes without saying is for most people it's stressful.
Yeah. So I think that, it's always shocking in my family that every year this comes around and we're always scrambling to have a
Mhm.
plan. Like who's hosting Thanksgiving? Who's hosting Christmas? What are the New Year's plans? Like all the things. And
Right.
it really could be like, let's just start with communication earlier in the year, right? And we could
Right.
prevent what's happening right now in the current, like, okay, yes, it's fall and it's Thanksgiving's in 3 weeks. um
Right.
but if people's families haven't talked about it and they're like, what are we doing in a couple weeks for
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, it's time to talk about it.
Right. Right. So what would you say as far as, what makes the holiday season? Obviously, we're talking a bit about something that makes a holiday season stressful and hard to handle, right? Like the potential of not knowing what's going on yet and it kind of coming out of nowhere. It feels like every year for most people it does kind of feel like that. But what are some other things that make the holiday season stressful?
Yeah, so I already just touched on like daylight savings, right? So anytime our sleep patterns are interrupted, our circadian rhythm, that has an impact on our mood, right? And our
Yeah.
mood has an impact on how our daily functioning, how we function at work, at school, in our relationships with others. And so that's why this is really crucial to like ask ourselves and check in. How are your sleep patterns and behaviors? What's your sleep hygiene like? How are you eating? Are you moving your body, right? Just knowing that there's going to be added stress and pressure to the schedule. But also holiday times is really hard for people that have lost loved ones, right? Or
Mhm.
just thinking back to what Thanksgiving or Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever used to be during childhood. Sometimes that can be difficult to let go of, right? Like we always
Yeah.
did this. We always went to grandma's house. And now as adults, maybe that's changed. And so sometimes we have a hard time letting go of what was in our lives. And then again, in particular, if a family member or loved one has passed on, the holidays can be really hard.
Yeah, that idea of the what was, and it can be either I wish it was still like that. It could be I'm glad that it's not like that. It can be I'm still feeling all of the things I felt every time around this year. And it can be stressful when somebody loses a family member. A lot of things shift when that occurs, and for a lot of families, that especially that next holiday season after that can be really, really difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. I was recently reading something about grief and loss. And of course, we can experience grief and loss from all sorts of things, breakups, death,
Mhm.
loss of job, lots of things. And some people say that years like 2 and 3 are tough. after losing a loved one or a
Mm.
partner or a child. And, we have to also remember collectively, we are still just 3 years out from this collective trauma. And so, again, my family can't be can't be the rare exception that people just are still figuring out routines of like, when do we vacation each year, and like who's
Right.
gonna host things, and are people healthy, right? We're like checking in
Mhm.
on people's health probably more than we ever did before 2020.
Yeah. Yeah, you're so right on that, where that becomes more of a topic, and in some ways really a nice additive, right? Of like checking in on family members on how we're doing. That used to not be the case probably for a lot of families. And then just being more aware of how we're all impacted by other people being sick. And, again, like everybody is so different in how they feel and relate to that. But that does shift things for a lot of families. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that if we learned anything from the pandemic, it's spend time with people that matter most. And so for maybe some people watching, they actually went to larger gatherings to celebrate holidays in the calendar year. And
Mhm.
now maybe they've just found some peace and calm in smaller gatherings, or having select friendships, and not as important to spend time with like large groups of people.
Right, 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 and that shifted, so then that's new traditions potentially, or that awkward time of not knowing what the new one is yet fully, you know?
Correct.
That can
Yeah.
be really hard. So how about, how can people manage the busyness of having potentially numerous gatherings and commitments that tend to happen over the holidays?
Yeah. So communicate, communicate, communicate. And again, if you're finding yourself watching this and you're like, oh, yeah, what are we doing on that Thursday that's coming up? Um, it's okay. It's not too late. I think
Yeah.
first and foremost, we get stuck in relationships when we don't discuss expectations, right? That's
Yes.
when conflict can happen. And so it's really important, whether you're single or in a partnership, or, have children or don't have children, to just talk to whoever you typically spend holidays with, right? About, okay, who's hosting, and what
Mhm.
time are we leaving, and around what time are we coming back, and like, what's the plan for the menu, and what am I supposed to bring, and all those things. Like when we prepare, it can minimize anxiety. Now, some people
Mhm.
certainly over prepare or over analyze social gatherings,
Right.
and maybe it increases their anxiety. But in general, when we start to talk about expectations earlier and with more time, preparation can be a really good and healthy thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alongside with expectations, we also have to set boundaries. And
Mhm.
we're just not great at that. They don't teach us that necessarily in school.
No.
So, I once recently talked to a client who had 3 things to do on one Saturday. And so in session, we were talking about, what's the most important to you, right? Like, what relationships are the most important? Who do you feel the need to spend more time with on that
Yeah.
day? And ultimately, she ended up going to 2 out of the 3 events, which is fine, but still felt stretched by it. And so
Yeah.
we have to set some boundaries around our time, because time is just really precious.
Yeah. I love that though, of thinking about what are those things that do matter most to you. And that takes a bit of pausing and reflecting on, what are the things that actually matter to you during the holidays? Because the things that tend to stress us out the most probably are things that we don't really necessarily want to be doing or need to be doing, but it just feels like we have to do those things. So, and again, like every relationship's different, every family's different, but
Mhm.
starting to think about what you actually want to happen during the holiday season is a good place to start. And I do like too that you said talk, 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 communicate,
Mhm.
communicate, communicate as well, because the expectations, especially with different families, they're going to be so different from one person to the next. Of maybe my expectation is to kind of show up whenever for our family thing, but my partner um, the time is extremely important of be there by 10 a.m. and then you leave at 2 and there's no wiggle room. But
Mm-hmm.
that you don't know all of those things unless you're talking about it openly. Or,
Oh, yes.
I'm expecting that you're going to be by me the whole time. Those kinds
Mm-hmm.
of things, really important, because, if the other person knows what to expect, then they can have, decide whether or not they can do that. They might
Mm-hmm.
not be able to do it, but at least the conversation is being shared. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. One of my favorite tips for if overwhelm strikes, and let's say you're at a gathering, whether it's friends or family or both, I am a firm believer in taking breaks, right? So
Yeah.
you've set the expectations, you've discussed your boundaries, you have a plan in place for this gathering, and then you start to feel something inside of your body. I think it's really important to do, again, just become self-aware, do that self-check-in. And it's okay to step outside and take a breather or take a 5-minute break, or,
Yeah.
just close your eyes and take a couple deep breaths. So all of that can kind of help sort through how overwhelming a lot of commitments can be.
Yeah, I love that, and I think people sometimes feel anxious about the breaks, but for the most part, people either don't notice or don't care or understand. You know,
Yes.
so it does seem like it's rare for that to be something substantial. But if you're nervous or uncomfortable about taking those breaks, um, sometimes it does help to just say like, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit overstimulated," which
Mhm.
isn't any sort of blaming of anything, but that the holidays and family and all of the stuff can feel like that,
Mhm.
and being honest with like, I need a break or I need to breathe, or just go to the bathroom and take some deep
Love it.
breaths right in there.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I try and account for, again, if you do have multiple gatherings or commitments in one day, I try to account for a little bit of down and rest time. I think that
Mhm.
that's really healthy. And like we've mentioned, it doesn't have to be, an hour nap. It can be
Yeah.
literally just sitting on your bed and closing your eyes for a couple of moments,
Mhm.
or just, building in a half hour travel time, whatever it is. It's
Mhm.
okay to find rest during this busy time.
Yeah. I love that what you just said with that travel time too, because if you allow yourself even a bigger gap for the travel time, I feel like that could really help people with some of the stress that goes along with it. Because on top of everything tends to be a feeling of being rushed. And
Yes.
especially if it's more than just yourself getting somewhere. I mean, it's a lot to get myself somewhere sometimes with all the stuff and all of that, but it can be a lot when you're traveling with other people and saying, okay, well, this is the time we need to be here, but why
Yeah.
don't we just have a buffer so that we can get there and feel like we're not just rushing and pushing and getting stressed. And then you could even take a stop somewhere, um,
Yes.
even like a walk. For me anyways, that's a good way to feel like, wake up, here we are
Hmm.
again, but also
Hmm.
feel really clear. So that
Yep.
can also be a really, really nice thing to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you said a walk. So again, I can't emphasize enough just prioritizing sleep, nutrition, movement of our bodies during this season.
Mhm.
Don't overextend yourself, right? Because then we start the new year and we're just feeling so defeated and exhausted and fatigued, and can't function at our jobs anymore. So
Mhm.
make choices that are healthy for you, for your partner, for your family, and then collectively also, like, don't overextend yourselves. It's okay to
Yeah.
like skip every single holiday gathering
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Yeah, I
attend.
like that, of like taking care of yourself, because ultimately if you're not showing up anyways as your best self, and that can create its own situations for sure. But knowing where your limits are,
Yes.
Like, when you talked about the boundaries, and they're going to be different for different people and maybe different at different times. But the holidays are a time where we know that there's going to be a tendency for there to be not as much focus on ourselves and our needs. So how do we make sure that we're taking care of ourselves? And like you said, checking in on those basics. Am I sleeping enough? Am I eating enough? Am I exercising enough? Am I having some time to myself? Whatever that looks like, could be really, really useful during the holidays.
Yeah. Yeah. I recently had somebody that was going home to spend time with family out of state, and we just talked about, the even just the length of a gathering. And I think you kind of touched on this too, like, okay, if we arrive here at this time and we're, I'd like to leave by 8. And so, this individual had to learn how to really just express himself and say, hey, this is too long of a visit for me. I need that to be shortened because I need to recharge. I need to rest and then recharge before the next thing in my life.
Yeah. Yep. And that is another important part, right? Of recognizing what is too much. And maybe if you don't feel like for this year, you know what that is, that could be a goal of the year of, okay, I'm going to be going to these things. Where's my threshold? When do I start to feel like I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm getting tired? What are some of those signals? Maybe you're disconnecting a bit. Maybe you're feeling like you're warm in your body. Kind of just noticing some of those things. So maybe you can do something that year, but if you feel like you're not in a position to do that yet, knowing next year, okay, I'm going to spend only 2 hours instead of the typical 4 hours. Or I know now that is a real signal that I have to pay attention to. And so I'm going to honor that for next year. Again, they're so different in how families interact, and there's not the one right way to do something. But like you said, changing that amount of time can be really huge, especially if you're in recovery too. That can be a huge thing as well, of knowing what your limits are to be potentially around alcohol, other substances. And hey, I can only be around this for so much, maybe an hour, maybe less, it depends again on the person.
Yep. Yeah, this would be a great time of year to try and block out or ignore FOMO and those feelings of fear of missing out. Again, you might have every single girlfriend in your circle wants to have an individual holiday dinner or celebration with you on a weeknight, and that's just not feasible, right? So we have to be realistic, knowing our limits and limitations, watching how much we're eating and drinking. I'm glad you said that. Substance use can certainly be a sensitive topic.
Yeah.
In regards to family gatherings, especially, or even friends or work parties, right? That can also be really triggering for people at the holidays.
Yeah. Yeah. So Allie, are there any other tips we didn't get to? Any other things that you think would be helpful for reducing some of our stress during the holidays?
Yeah. I think ultimately we enjoy ourselves the most when we are present with our loved ones. So be a gracious guest. If you feel the need to bring a little something as like a gift for the host, great. Make food and share food that's within your wheelhouse. This isn't the time of year to try to make a 3-layer cake for Christmas Eve or something outlandish, right? Like, this is the time of year to, okay, here's what I can contribute. Here's how I'm going to show up. So, overspending, that's another tip to just start thinking about that and watching that, how much you want to spend this holiday season. With all these extra gatherings and social events and commitments comes sometimes a hit at our bank account. And so thinking about that and sitting with that, how much do I really need to spend on physical gifts for my loved ones? Yes, just some other little ones I had, being a gracious guest people love a gracious guest. So playing with the kids, posing for pictures, offering to clean up. It's things that maybe you wouldn't think of that make a difference in the lives of others and actually can make you feel good. So
Yeah.
maybe that's your break from adult conversations, is getting on the ground and playing a game with your niece or nephew, or going
Mhm.
into the kitchen and silently starting to wash some dishes. These are all just little things that I thought of that could help alleviate some stress of gatherings.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I love that of finding ways to take breaks that can also be really useful and connective, right? Like just that time too in the cleaning and helping out in that regards. I know as a host, I would way rather have that than a hostess gift, right? Like, and just knowing that, hey, if you feel like that's, not giving an extra gift or something like that's not in your budget, then you can also say, hey, this is my gift for this year. I mean, I would like that. So
Yeah.
thinking about that too, of people are just for the most part happy that you're there and
Yeah.
happy to connect, and also happy that you're not feeling like you're overextending yourself by visiting. Most people wouldn't want that for you. So recognizing that people care about you and they don't want you to be in a position of feeling extra stressed either. So recognizing that that's an important thing, and coming back to yourself. You deserve to have the compassion and empathy towards yourself during the holidays.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will not be I will be the first to admit that I have ordered desserts from a professional baker to bring on Thanksgiving Day, because it's just not worth the stress. Didn't want to budget
Mhm.
the time to bake, didn't want to budget the money to buy all the ingredients. And looking at my schedule, thought, you know what? This is going to bless me and this is going to bless the gathering.
Yeah. Yep. And it's really hard to mess it up, right? That's right. I was thinking of, like, you make a pie and
Mm.
oops, it got burnt. That's
Yep.
awesome. Yeah, I
Yep.
love that. All right. Well, thanks so much, Allie, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me and chatting about
Yeah.
this. Now we just have to go apply
Yeah.
all of these stress-free tips.
I know. Me too. And so if anyone wants to talk more with you about reducing some of their holiday stress or stress in general, they can reach you at shoresidetherapies.com, and all of your information is right online.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Okay.